Hello ladies and gentlemen and movie lovers of all kind, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am your host, Brett Murphy, and for today's video, it is going to be another pair of retro reviews. And I am going to be reviewing Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home. With Spider-Man No Way Home releasing this weekend, now seemed like an appropriate time to revisit all of the previous Spider-Man movies. My most recent video was my dual retro review of The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and if you go back into my retro reviews playlist, you will find that a couple of years ago, I did reviews on Sam Raimi's trilogy of films as well. Yes, they are a bit rough around the edges, but I still do stand by the majority of what I said. And now our last stop before No Way Home are Tom Holland's previous two films. Before I get into the actual reviews themselves, I just wanted to let you all know that I have an entire playlist dedicated to all of my retro reviews. So be sure to check that out and I guarantee you'll find something you like. And so without further ado, let's hop right into things. So of course, first things first, I will be covering 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming. To kick off the positives, I've always liked how the opening ties right back into the original Avengers movie, and quickly and easily gives us the villain's origin story without spending too much time on it. I also really appreciate how the movie itself was not another origin story, and hey look Netflix, it's high school kids that actually look like high school kids. And here's I guess a hot take for some of you out there, Peter's obsession with Tony makes sense, and it always has. And it helped to seamlessly integrate the character into this ever-expanding universe that has been going already for nearly a decade by the time this movie released. I mean, if he really was that kid from Iron Man 2, well, Iron Man just saved his life, and even if he wasn't that kid from Iron Man 2, he still grew up in the world of the Avengers, and now has extraordinary powers himself, so it would make sense that he would idolize them and want to be one of them. This movie also has so many great side characters. I love Ned as Peter's BFF and guy in the chair. Jon Favreau as Happy Hogan is awesome as always, and I actually really enjoy his and Peter's dynamic. And of course, Marissa Tomei is wonderful as Aunt May. I just wish we got a bit more of her and a bit more down-to-earth moments between her and Peter. I've always liked how reckless and new to all of this Spider-Man is in this flick. We never really got to see that side of him, so I enjoy just seeing him crash through people's backyards and breaking tree houses and things like that, or when he's put into situations where he doesn't have anything to web onto. It helps to remind you that he's only like a 15-year-old kid and this is all still very much so a learning process. Plain and simple, Michael Keaton is perfect as the Vulture, aka Adrian Toomes. And Michael Giacchino's score is exceptional. The lesson that Tony teaches Peter is much needed. The whole, if you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it. It's a fantastic moment, very impactful and important to the growth of the character. And Peter's come on Spider-Man moment is brilliant. With Tony's words echoing in his ears, he is truly learning what it means to be Spider-Man and what it means to be a hero. Not gonna lie either, this movie actually has a really solid ending between Peter's mature decision and that hilarious Aunt May moment. I do have one middle ground point for this movie, and for those of you who don't know, middle ground means it's not a positive nor a negative, it's just kind of somewhere in the middle. And that is that the fairy sequence in this movie is great, but I really wish that it was Spider-Man who got to save the day. However, I do also get that Peter did need to learn a lesson. Now for the negatives, and this has always been my biggest negative with this movie, and it still remains that way to this day. And that is that this movie just feels super small scale, like too small scale. Look, it doesn't need to be an Avengers level threat or anything like that, but they took the whole friendly neighborhood Spider-Man a bit too far in my mind. I wish we just got more of downtown New York and other iconic locations. Shocker is utterly wasted. The character is essentially reduced to just being a single glove rather than an actual character at all. And that really sucks because he's honestly among my favorite Spider-Man villains. I'm also not a fan of the new Flash Thompson. There is absolutely nothing about this character that screams he would bully Peter Parker. And Liz is fine as the love interest. Maybe it's because we didn't really get a ton of her in the movie, but I just kind of find she's just sort of a meh character. She's just really not overly interesting. I also don't love how fake the new suit feels and really a lot of the action with it. Don't get me wrong, there is some great action in here, but I just can't really put my finger on it. It all just feels so smooth and flawless that it doesn't feel real. if that makes any sense. And the last little negative I have, and by little negative I genuinely do mean little negative, and that is, why in the world would Spider-Man ever need to drive, aside from it being in an Audi and that's like a sponsor of the movie or whatever. Just really bad, noticeable product placement, kind of just shoehorned in there. In the end though, this was a truly great solo introduction for the character into the greater MCU. And Tom Holland, in my eyes, was honestly the perfect casting choice for the new Peter Parker / Spider-Man for this new generation. And with all that being said, I'm going to be giving Spider-Man Homecoming an 8 out of 10. And now we're on to Spider-Man Far From Home. Firstly, Martin Starr and JB Smoove are absolute units. They are endlessly hilarious, their dialogue and line delivery are perfect, they just have excellent comedic timing, and they're awesome characters. The European setting is surprisingly refreshing for a Spider-Man movie, honestly just refreshing for an MCU movie in general. It was kind of nice to have Nick Fury back and have him in it as much as he was. And it also seemed like Samuel L. Jackson was having fun in the role again after a few brief but very serious appearances. Jake Gyllenhaal was a brilliant casting choice as Mysterio, and he was superb as expected. I like how conflicted Peter is in this one. After being blipped away and coming back, he sort of just wants to settle back into his life and be a normal kid, tell his crush he likes her, and go on his school field trip. But he's also now a full-blown world-saving hero, and he has those responsibilities. Mysterio's betrayal is so well done, and it actually hits super hard because their friendship felt so genuine. Anyone who knows Spider-Man at all knows who Mysterio is and knows that he's a bad guy. But as we got deeper and deeper into the story, you couldn't help but feel like the filmmakers were trying to throw us off and actually just make him a good guy. Peter and MJ's relationship is adorably awkward and feels so authentic. And after a few bouts with Mysterio, Peter not knowing what's real and being so afraid just feels so genuine. And I can only imagine how terrifying that must be. I also personally love Peter's struggle in understanding his spider sense, aka his Peter tingle. The final fight with all of the drones is pretty badass. And the ending moment of "You Can't Trick Me Anymore" was a triumphant stroke of genius. Oh, and this movie also has one of the most bonkers and jaw-dropping end credit scenes ever. Oh, and there's also a middle ground for this one as well, and that is Peter's nightmare illusion sequence. Yes, it is extremely inventive and unique, but it also just feels so unbelievably fake. And it kind of just pulls me out of it. Like, I get that it's an illusion, but it literally feels like you're just watching a cartoon or a CGI cutscene. I don't like how this movie deals with the blip and the in memoriam of some of Earth's mightiest heroes. It just feels like they brush it all aside in a far too comedic fashion. And something like WandaVision handled it much better. Okay, I'm just gonna come out and say it too, the whole drone thing literally makes no sense at all. I get the illusion part with the projectors and stuff, but there are just so many flaws with that idea, like the water and the smoke and the fire, and everything else that drones just could not possibly produce, no matter how advanced and scientific it all is. I get it's in the MCU and literally almost none of it is possible at all technologically from, magic and this and that and everything else that Tony Stark created. I get it. And I understand that there was like nothing else they could do for Mysterio, but I just don't buy it. I also hate that Mysterio is basically just an Iron Man villain. And I also felt like they were taking away from Tony's legacy by saying that he didn't actually invent that tech and that it was someone else and he stole it. I mean, this is just some random guy we've never met before until this movie, so it just kind of irks me a little bit. Especially coming fresh off of Endgame, where he just made that ultimate sacrifice, so it kind of just feels like a backhanded slap in the face. And then I just have a few little nitpicks with this movie, like the conveniently placed tech in the back of a private jet so that Peter can create a brand new suit with all the boops and bobs and gadgets and stuff. And why exactly were there no Avengers coming to this final battle? And Fury is so gullible. Look, I know that he's a Skrull and all, but come on. And why didn't Mysterio have to transfer back control of Edith to Peter? He kind of just throws the glasses on and that whole aspect just kind of goes out the window? Regardless, just like Homecoming, I genuinely had a great time with this movie. And it had a lot of ground to cover. I mean, it was essentially an epilogue to Endgame. It was the final movie in the Infinity Saga. It also had to still be a solo Spider-Man movie and a sequel solo Spider-Man movie at that. Not to mention, it's set up for No Way Home. So despite this movie having a ton to juggle, it juggled it all extremely well. And once again, even though I didn't mention it as a positive, I have to give major props to Tom Holland. This dude is truly an up-and-coming force, and it makes sense why we are seeing him pretty much everywhere nowadays. He's also not just the dude playing Spider-Man. I mean, go check out movies like Cherry or The Devil all the time to see that this dude has some real acting chops. But once again, I do believe he was the perfect casting choice for this generation's Spider-Man. And so, with all of that being said, I'm going to now be giving Spider-Man Far From Home also an 8 out of 10. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with my reviews. And while you're at it, feel free to let me know what you would score both of these movies out of 10 and what your favorite moment is from each. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And if you'd like to see more content, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing that little bell icon. That way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe. Thank you so much for watching. And that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you, and while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.